Welcome to the Explainer. Now, when you hear AI, you probably think about things like new apps, new services, right? But what if its biggest impact isn't on your phone, but behind the scenes? What if it's quietly rewriting the actual rules of global power? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
All right, let's get right into it. For decades, it felt like globalization was just this unstoppable train, connecting everything and everyone. But lately, there's been this huge backlash. And while there's a pretty common story about why that's happening, a deeper look suggests we might be missing the most important part of the whole puzzle.
So, to really get what's happening now, we have to start with the conventional wisdom. The story about this backlash that, let's be honest, you've probably heard 1,000 times. This story says the whole backlash is basically a populist revolt coming from the bottom up. It's all about economic pain. People lost good jobs, their wages didn't budge for years, and they just felt completely left behind. The big promise of globalization was that it would lift everybody up, but for millions, that promise just fell flat. The system, plain and simple, failed to share the wealth. And so, if that's the problem, the solution seems pretty straightforward, right? It's a political failure, so you need better politics. You beef up the social safety nets, you redistribute some of the money, and you try to make the whole system feel fair again. The core idea here is that the engine of global capitalism is fine. It just needs a tune-up and some better management. Okay, but this is where it gets really, really interesting. Because what if that whole story, as true as it is for so many, is just a symptom? What if it's the surface noise of a much deeper, more fundamental transformation happening underneath? And that brings us to a completely different theory. This one argues that the backlash we're seeing isn't really a reaction from the public at all. Instead, it's the result of a massive change in how capitalism itself works, a change that's being driven from the top down. And this right here is the heart of it. This theory says that the rise of AI has totally flipped the script for the most powerful corporations and the most powerful countries. The old way of doing things, global free trade, open markets, it's just not the best game in town for them anymore, not by a long shot. So let's just put these two arguments side by side so you can see how different they are. On one side, you've got the story of a popular revolt against a system that feels unfair. But on the other, you have a story about a strategic pivot by the elites who've basically found a new, more powerful game to play, all thanks to technology. It's a huge shift from trying to make markets serve society to making them serve the state. All of this leads us to the new kind of world order that's starting to take shape. And it's got a name: techno-nationalism. Okay, so techno-nationalism. It sounds a little complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. This is not about making markets serve people better. This is about taking corporate power and plugging it directly into the strategic goals of the nation-state. So think less about free trade and a whole lot more about winning the global race for tech supremacy. And this really shows you what the new priorities are. The goal isn't just about getting access to new markets anymore, no. The real goal is controlling the actual physical infrastructure that the entire digital world is built on. Things like data centers, energy grids, and, this is the big one, the semiconductor supply chains that are the lifeblood of all AI. And this isn't some abstract theory. We can see it playing out in the news every single day. It's crystal clear in China, where key industries are basically extensions of the state. But it's also happening right here in the US, with these huge subsidies to build chip factories at home and tight controls on what tech can be sold abroad. They might use different words for it, innovation over here, control over there, but the logic underneath is almost identical. So, if this whole massive global shift isn't really being driven by a grassroots movement, then who is in the driver's seat? And what on earth does it mean for the rest of us? This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It gets right to the core of the argument. All these big things we're seeing, the trade wars, the fights over supply chains, the tech rivalries, they aren't just bubbling up from public anger. They are being engineered from the top by a new fusion of state and corporate power. But, and this is a really big but, this new techno-nationalist order is no silver bullet. In fact, it could end up making things a lot worse by cramming even more power and money into the hands of a few. It does nothing to fix the problems that made people angry in the first place, and it completely blurs the line between what's good for the public and what's good for corporate profit. And this is really the end game of this whole transformation. The companies leading the charge, the huge tech giants, they're not just light app companies anymore. They are becoming heavy, physically based infrastructure powers. They're like the new railroad monopolies of the 21st century.
controlling the essential digital tracks that everything else has to run on.
And so as we watch this new world take shape, a world driven by AI and national strategy, we're left with a massive question. In a system where the line between the most powerful companies on Earth and the most powerful governments on Earth is basically disappearing, where does that leave everyone else? Where does that leave citizens, small businesses, and maybe even the idea of a democratic society itself?